Hi, my name is Katie. It's time to tell you about all 16 books that I read in August. It's currently 100 degrees outside and I'm ready for it to be fall. Thankfully, I still read some amazing books in August. I did 2 big vlogs this month where I read cozy books for 24 hours and then I read books about witches pretty much for the whole month, so I'll link those videos up here if you're interested in checking those out. I'll also put them in the description so you can hear my more in-depth thoughts as I read all of these. I do also have books that I didn't read in those videos that I absolutely loved and I'm dying to tell you about, so even if you've watched those videos, don't worry, there's plenty more to talk about. So let's start with the books that I read for this witch video. So the first one I read was In Defense of Witches. This was much less about witches and much more about activism, kind of using the witch narrative and the fact that witchy things are trending right now to bring people into feminism and activism. It was good. I'm glad I read it. Didn't really serve the purposes of the reason that I was reading it, but I see why so many people love this book. I've been seeing a lot of friends from college reading this, and I would definitely recommend it if you're looking to get into the feminism activism conversation. There's lots of really great sources in it, so you get a little taste of those, and then if you're interested, you can always go and read those more in depth. That's all I have to say about that book. Then I read Initiated. This book was a roller coaster ride for me. I loved the beginning, then didn't love it, and then loved it again, and then ended in kind of a weird place. But I'm so glad that I read this, and it was perfect for the video that I was reading it for. It's a memoir of Amanda Yates Garcia. She's a witch, her mother was a witch. That's her full-time job. She practices witchcraft. It was really interesting to see both her memoir story and also all the really great history of witchcraft. There was a lot of conversation about the way that witches are depicted in media and how capitalism is co-opting the witch story. Although I didn't love every page, overall, I think this is a really valuable book, and if you're looking to read some nonfiction about witches, this is a great choice. I absolutely loved this book. I devoured it so quickly. We follow our main character, Emmanuelle. She lives in this puritanical society. There's some cult vibes going on. There's a dark wood, there's a witch, there's a curse. It's very dark. There's a lot of blood imagery in here. This is so atmospheric and unsettling all the way through, and I absolutely loved the way that the story went. It ended in such a crazy way. I had a really good time. I also read Slewfoot. This is another puritanical story, but so different from The Year of the Witching. I see these books recommended in tandem a lot, but I really think that they are both doing different things. This is the story of Abatha. She lives in a puritanical society. Her husband dies, and her townspeople are basically trying to take her land and her power away from her. She meets this creature in the woods, and we're not really sure who he is, and he's not sure who he is either. So the book is his journey of trying to figure out, is he a devil? Is he a god? Is he good? Is he bad? How does he perform magic? And also Abatha trying to grapple with this situation because she's grown up in this puritanical society. So she's constantly worried about whether or not he is the devil. And it's just a really interesting story. I've never seen a witchcraft story like this, and I would highly recommend, if you like witch stories but you're looking for kind of a new twist, this is your book. Then I read a witch fantasy, The Once and Future Witches. This brought back my childhood love of fantasy. I definitely want to continue picking up more fantasy in the future. We are following 3 sisters. They haven't seen each other for I think it's 7 years, so we're kind of following them when they come back together, learning their backstory. There's a lot about women's suffrage in this. It's a very political witch story. There's also familiars and magic. There's a spell before every single chapter. It's just a really fun fantasy ride with these conversations about intersectionality and about activism and women's suffrage and the fact that women of color and people in the LGBTQIA+ community have often been left out of feminist conversations. If you're looking for a witch fantasy to read this spooky season, this is a great choice. Such a wholesome book that I want to see everyone reading this fall is Mooncakes. This is an absolutely adorable graphic novel. Our main character is a teenage witch. She works in her grandmother's bookstore. She is deaf, and her love interest is a non-binary werewolf. They are so freaking cute together. I loved every single page of this. The art style is beautiful. We've got black cats. It's just so adorable. There's some really interesting conversations about accessibility at the end, and I just really love loved this entire ride. I also read We Ride Upon Sticks. I was so hopeful that this was going to be a new favorite, and unfortunately it wasn't. This is the story of a girls' field hockey team who makes a deal with the devil. They sign their names in a book. They tie a tube sock around their arms. Suddenly they're winning games that they weren't before. If you're looking for something hilarious and absurd, please pick this up. I don't really love stories about sports. I don't really love stories about a group of friends in high school. Ultimately, this is a story about a high school girls field hockey team, so it didn't quite work for me. I definitely think other people have the potential for this to be a new favorite. If you like absurd stories, if you have any 80s nostalgia, highly recommend this one. Those are all the books that I read for that witch video. If you're curious to hear more of my thoughts on those witch books, I'll link that video up here. Okay, break from the video books. Let's talk about some stuff that I haven't already told you about in other videos. I read Mr. Penumbras 24-Hour Bookstore. This is so good. I don't know why I don't hear more people talking about this, because if you like dark academia, here you go. It's this one. This is about a young man who goes to work in Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore. It's a regular bookstore, but there's also this shelf of really weird books, and he's not allowed to look at any of them. Nobody buys them. They just check them out and then return them. And all the people who are checking these books out are really odd. Turns out there's a whole secret society going on. This is so good. If you like dark academia and you're looking for something a little more whimsical, I would recommend this. The main character did grate on me a little bit in the same way that like Ready Player One grated on me a little bit. He did get less annoying as the book went on. He was just obsessed with this girl and it was a little bit annoying, but otherwise I did really love this one. Then I did a 24-hour readathon where I read Cozy Things. I read my 100th book of the year. I've now read 100 books. Can you believe it? 106, I think, is my grand total. Please explain to me how I've read 106 books this year, because I don't understand how that's physically possible. This readathon went so well. I found 2 favorite authors and my favorite romance ever, which is Swordheart. You guys, T. Kingfisher, I'll read anything she writes. Because if she could make this one of my favorite books I've read this year, she can do anything. She can do anything. This is about our main character, Hala. She's inherited a great deal of money, and her family is trying to take that money away from her, marry her to her cousin who has clammy hands, and she does not want to do this. She is a respectable widow. She doesn't want to be in this situation. They've locked her in her room. She's in a bad situation. She tries to take this sword off the mantle in her room because she's going to end her life because she's absolutely done with what's happening in this very absurd way. Once she unsheathes this sword, the spirit of the sword comes out. His name is Sarkis. The audiobook, he has a really thick Scottish accent and it's so funny. I would highly recommend the audiobook. It's one of my favorite audiobooks I have ever read. Sarkis is horrified. He stops her from killing herself. Basically, he's sworn to protect her because she's the wielder of the sword and he's the spirit of the sword, basically. And so they get into all of these shenanigans. This book is hilarious. I smiled the whole way through. If you want to hear my in-depth thoughts about this, please go check out that 24-hour readathon because I gushed about it for probably 10 minutes of that video. I also read some lovely graphic novels. I read Taproot. This is about a gardener who falls in love with a ghost. Wasn't my favorite thing that I read this month, but I still really enjoyed it. If you're a graphic novel fan, a good one to pick up. If you're not a graphic novel fan, probably not the thing that's going to get you into graphic novels. The Tea Dragon Society is a different story. I loved this so much. If you are weary of graphic novels and you want something that's really short to kind of get you into the genre, see if you might like it, I think this would be a good one to start with. These tea dragons are so freaking cute. My battery died, but we're back to talk about the cute dragons. Look at how adorable they are. They're so cute. This is about this young girl. Her mother's a blacksmith. She's like not vibing with the whole blacksmith career for herself, so she's trying to explore other things. She finds this tea dragon. She returns him to his home, and the person who's in charge of the tea dragons basically tells her what's up with the tea dragons. She gets to learn about all of them. She makes a friend, and it's just so cute. All of these tea dragons grow like leaves or flowers or horns, and then you use them to make tea, and then there's some magic in the tea as well. It's a really, really cute story, and I want to put every single one of these images on my wall framed. They're so beautiful. love the art style. My favorite graphic novel, I know. I thought it was gonna be hard to beat Tea Dragon Society, but Alice Oseman did it with Heartstopper. I finally read Heartstopper. This deserves all the hype that it gets. I am so excited to finish the series so that I can finally watch the TV show. I've already picked up the second book. I'm just so excited to continue in this world. The sophistication and the craft that went into creating this graphic novel is top tier. This is, I think, my favorite graphic novel that I have ever read. This is the most well-constructed graphic novel I have ever read. I love Alice Oseman's style. I love the fact that all of the text is handwritten. I love the color palette. This is a beautiful story about two boys who meet and fall in love. I don't usually like high school stories, but this one really had my whole heart. The last book I read in that cozy video was The Graveyard Book, and Neil Gaiman is gonna be a new favorite author of mine. I love the way that he writes these fairy tale-esque stories that feel deeply comforting and also deeply unsettling. There's this undercurrent of darkness that runs through everything that he does, and it just works so well for me. This is about a young boy. His family is murdered at the beginning of this story while he's a baby. The ghosts in the graveyard up the hill from where he lived decide to adopt him. And he basically grows up in this graveyard with some supernatural abilities. He meets some supernatural characters. It's a story about him growing up. There's also action and plot that's happening in here. There are people trying to harm him, and there's this whole overarching quest basically that he's on. But it's also this story of a boy growing up and dealing with the regular things that everyone deals with. I love Neil Gaiman's writing style. I'm gonna go read everything he's ever written. So happy that I read this. I also read So Happy For You by Celia Lasky, and I was a little worried about this book. I had seen Kayla from Books and Lala reading it, and I was like, I don't know if a toxic friendship is something that I want. I was in the mood to keep reading stories that were fast-paced and a little bit absurd, so I picked up So Happy For You, and I loved this book. I read it on audiobook. I walked so many steps the day that I read this because I always read audiobooks on a walk. I was hitting like 13,000 steps while I was reading this because I wanted to be reading this all the time. I love this book. I'm really bummed that it has such low ratings, but I thought it was incredible. It's a story of a woman who has been asked to be her friend's maid of honor. She reluctantly agrees, and the first line of the book is something about, if I'm gonna tell you the story of how my best friend and I ended up trying to kill each other, I should probably start with the day she asked me to be her maid of honor. And that's how the book starts, and that's what we're doing the whole book. We're in a near future where marriage is kind of like falling apart a little bit, and there's this dating app that gives ratings to people on their like marriage ability, and women are like rotten after age 30 or something. Men don't go rotten, women do. And basically the society has become a little bit obsessed with marriage, and women are doing all of these wedding charms in order to ensure that their marriage will last. So there's super long trains, or sage and garlic bouquets instead of flowers. All of these really weird things that people are doing in order to ensure that their marriage is going to last. Some of these wedding charms are a little bit more nefarious than other ones. Some of them get real spooky real fast, and we get to see that kind of throughout the book of these really unsettling things that are happening and how that ties into this whole situation. I loved the message in this book. I have to say, I think I really do like toxic friendship stories, so if you have any recommendations for those, I'd love to hear them. I enjoyed every single page of this. I loved it so much. I am gonna tease an upcoming video. I will be reading a bunch of dark academia in September, and I'll have a video out in the first couple weeks of September where I'm reading tons and tons of dark academia. I'm gonna spoil the first book, Catherine House. Just like So Happy For You, I'm so sad that this has so many low ratings. I don't understand it. I loved this book so much. We're following our main character, Inez, and she gets into Catherine House. Catherine House is this elite, above even Ivy League school where it is completely free for anyone who gets into the school. Tuition is free, but but you have to leave everything behind. You're there for 3 years. Once you step foot on the grounds, you're basically cut off from everyone else. No phone calls home, no letters home, no photographs, can't even bring your own clothes or bed linens. Everything that you do and see and ingest for those 3 years is going to be given to you for free by Catherine House. There is also a super secretive concentration major situation that is called New Materials. It's a little culty secret society situation happening. There are some rituals that are deeply unsettling. This is also an incredibly nostalgic look at college university life. The author wrote this after she had graduated from Yale, and she was a couple of years out of college, and she wrote this looking back with this nostalgic view. And I'm in a similar situation. I graduated over a year ago now, and I felt that nostalgia about that college university time. So if you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts on Catherine House and on the rest of the dark academia books, like R.F. Kuang's new book, Babel, which I will be reading in that video, please make sure you subscribe so that you won't miss that one. I'm really excited for it, and like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm really ready for it to be fall, so dark academia is where we are going to be in September. The last book I have to tell you about is Neil Gaiman's The Ocean at the End of the Lane. After I loved the Graveyard book so much, I wanted to pick up more from Neil Gaiman, and I destroyed this book. I read it in a day. I loved it so much. I don't think it's quite as good as the Graveyard book, but I did really enjoy it. This is about a man. Something has happened in his personal life, and he's going back to his childhood home because he's feeling really lost. He goes to this farm that he used to have a friend at, and she apparently convinced him that the duck pond behind their house was an ocean. And so he goes to the ocean and he sits on a bench and he's remembering and reflecting on his childhood. And in his childhood, there was a very magical incident that happened. It's a little supernatural. It's very fairy tale-esque. It's being told primarily from the perspective of this young boy who is, I think, 8 years old. But it's also very dark. Like, it's an adult book. It covers very serious topics, but it still feels very fairy tale-esque. And I just love that about Neil Gaiman's writing, that it's just so sinister and so fairy tale, and I love it so much. Highly recommend The Ocean at the End of the Lane. Those are all 16 books that I read in August. Please let me know in the comments what you guys have been reading this month. Let me know if you're gonna pick up any of these or if you've read them before and what you thought of them. I'm not gonna be doing a September TBR this month. It just doesn't really fit into my content schedule. So I'm just gonna do a little mini TBR for you now. I am gonna be doing a video on dark academia books. So I'm gonna be reading 6 dark academia books. The favorites like The Secret History are going to be in there, as well as some lesser known works like Vita Nostra. I will also be reading Babel by R.F. Kuang, which I'm really excited about. I'm also going to be doing a 5 stars predictions video, so I'm going to be reading from authors that I have loved before. So if those sound interesting to you, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. Thank you guys so much for being here. I post every other Tuesday and every Friday. So I will see you very soon. I hope you're having a lovely week. I'll see you later. Bye.